The senator's son thought he could bully his way through Judge Judy's courtroom until one quiet moment turned his entire world upside down. He came in smirking, certain his father's power made him untouchable. But the second Judy raised a single eyebrow, his confidence began to crack. And when she pulled out a thin, unexpected folder, Ethan Marlowe realized he wasn't the one running this room. She was. What happened next didn't just shock the courtroom, it shattered him. The courtroom seemed to shrink in the seconds after his threat, as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. The senator's son, Ethan Marlowe, carried himself with the polished arrogance of someone born into rooms where consequences rarely existed. His suit was crisp, his tie knotted with the precision of a political handshake, and his smirk, that subtle, practiced smirk, suggested he believed even silence should respect him. Judge Judy observed him the way an expert appraiser studies a forged painting. No emotion, no rush, just calm, discerning calculation. The light overhead cast a sharp line across her face, half shadow, half focus, giving the moment a severity the room could feel in its bones. Across the aisle stood the young woman who brought the claim, a community volunteer named Laya Torres. She pressed both hands against her folder as if it anchored her in place. Her eyes flicked between Judy and Ethan, the tension in her shoulders revealing she had heard every poisonous syllable of his whispered threat. The clerk pretended to type, but the rhythm of the keys had faltered. Even the bailiff stood a fraction straighter, sensing the emotional temperature shift. Then Judy finally broke the silence, with stillness, not words. She simply raised one eyebrow. It was astonishing how a single gesture dismantled Ethan's carefully curated confidence. He swallowed, his jaw tightening before he plastered on a smile that tried too hard to look effortless. "Mr. Marlowe," Judy said, her voice steady enough to straighten the air itself, "I'm going to ask you to repeat what you just whispered." A heavy murmur rippled through the gallery. Ethan hesitated, for the first time since entering the room. The camera lights reflected faintly in his eyes, catching the flicker of fear he intended to hide. "I said," he began, voice smoother than before, "that I hope we handle this reasonably, Your Honor. My father—" Judy cut him off without raising her volume. "No, that is not what you said." His smile froze, cracking at the edges. Lila's breath hitched. She stepped back half an inch, surprised by Judy's precision. The air felt charged now, a low hum beneath every heartbeat. Ethan's posture stiffened, his fingers tapping against his belt, the movement sharp and agitated. He was not used to being dissected. He was used to being deferred to. Judy leaned forward slightly, voice dropping a note deeper. "Mr. Marlowe, you threatened me. I do not tolerate threats. Say the words aloud." Ethan opened his mouth, the room holding a collective breath, but before anything emerged, Judy's gaze cut through him like a scalpel. And in that razor-thin pause, something in his composure buckled. He inhaled sharply, eyes darkening with the realization that she would not let him hide behind influence. The lie on his tongue trembled, and then faltered. When he finally spoke, the room leaned in, waiting for the fracture to become a break. Ethan stepped forward like he owned the air around him. The crack in his confidence had sealed itself into a smirk, a desperate patch job only he believed in. And the moment he opened his mouth, the courtroom felt the shift from threat to performance. He adjusted his jacket with a sharp tug, turning to face the gallery first, not the judge, not the victim. The gesture carried a silent message. "Watch me." It was the kind of posture belonging to someone who had never doubted applause. Judge Judy watched him with the patience of a storm waiting to land. "Your Honor," he began, clearing his throat as though preparing a campaign speech, "I think we are misunderstanding each other. People say things in confidence all the time. You cannot take everything so literally." The gallery murmured. Lila's grip on her folder tightened, her knuckles pale. Ethan glanced at her, a flicker of condescension in his eyes, the kind that said he had already decided she was beneath him. He raised a finger, casually, a pointer that practically dismissed her existence. "First of all," he continued, "I want to clarify that this entire situation has been blown wildly out of proportion. Ms. Torres has a habit of exaggerating." Lila's breath stilled. The insult hit harder because he delivered it like fact, like policy. The clerk paused, typing again. Judy said nothing. Silence became the scalpel. So, Ethan pressed on, emboldened by the lack of interruption. When she claims I threatened her project, she is conveniently forgetting that I supported it at first. I even offered to introduce her to people who could help her. Important people. He made sure to emphasize the last words. A calculated drop of privilege. Lila lowered her gaze, eyes shimmering with held-back frustration. And when she did not appreciate that, Ethan added with a shrug, I simply stepped back. That is all. These accusations of intimidation are, honestly, laughable. He laughed. Alone. The sound ricocheted awkwardly across the room, blending arrogance with something more fragile, fear hidden under forced confidence. Judy shifted her gaze to the victim. Ms. Torres, did he offer support? Lila nodded, voice gentle. He did, until I turned down his request to add his name as honorary founder. He said, if I did not accept the help the way he wanted to give it, he would make sure the project never launched. The gallery stiffened. Ethan scoffed loudly, hands slicing through the air. That is ridiculous. She is twisting my words. I said it as advice, not a threat. Judy's eyes narrowed. Advice usually helps people, Mr. Marlowe, not frightens them. He opened his mouth to argue, but the judge's tone cut sharper than any objection. The room felt smaller now, the lights harsher, the silence heavier. Ethan shifted his stance, suddenly less sure of his footing. His finger-pointing confidence softened into defensive fidgeting. Judy folded her hands. Let us continue. Her calm dismissal rattled him far more than any raised voice could. The smirk wavered again, thin as paper under heat. And before he could steady it, Judy's next question sliced across the room, aimed straight at the lie he had not yet told. Lila's voice barely rose above a whisper, yet the room leaned toward her as if pulled. Even Ethan stopped fidgeting, sensing the shift he could not control. Truth has a sound, quiet, steady, and undeniable. Lila stepped forward, the folder she carried pressed tightly against her chest. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow that made her look both fragile and brave at once. She took a breath, then another, grounding herself in the space Ethan had spent the last 10 minutes trying to dominate. Ms. Torres, Judge Judy said gently, you may speak. Lila nodded. When she lifted her eyes, they did not hold anger. They held exhaustion, the kind that builds after months of being dismissed, doubted, pushed aside. I started the literacy project 2 years ago, she began. It was supposed to be simple, book drives, tutoring programs, workshops for kids who fall behind. Her fingers tapped the folder lightly, an unconscious tremor. Then I met Mr. Marlowe at a fundraiser. He said he loved the idea. Across the room, Ethan smirked, as if she were proving his point, but the smirk faded when she continued. He offered help, yes, but when I declined the honorary founder title he wanted, everything changed. He stopped returning calls, sponsors pulled out, venues suddenly became unavailable. A low murmur drifted across the gallery. Ethan scoffed under his breath. But Judy raised a hand, commanding silence without effort. Lila kept going, the tremble in her voice giving way to a steadier cadence. I did not know what was happening at first, but then he started showing up. Ethan lifted his chin, feigning confusion. Showing up where? Lila swallowed. Everywhere. Meetings I never told him about. Spaces he had no connection to. He would stand in the back, smiling like he belonged there. Her eyes lowered briefly, as if remembering each moment in painful detail. And when I finally confronted him, he said, her voice faltered, catching on the memory. He said I should be grateful someone like him cared enough to watch my progress. He said people like me do not get far unless someone powerful decides they should. The words landed heavily, coating the room in quiet disgust. Judge Judy's expression sharpened, a flicker of fire behind her calm. Mr. Marlowe, did you say that? Ethan laughed, too quickly. Your Honor, she is clearly dramatizing. Mr. Marlowe, Judy's tone flattened into steel. Answer the question. His mouth opened, then closed, his eyes darting. The silence stretched. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Back at the stand, Lila lifted the folder and pulled out a printed screenshot, a message from Ethan, time-stamped late at night. She held it in trembling fingers as she offered it to the clerk. I saved this, she whispered, in case he tried to deny everything. The clerk's eyes widened as she read it before passing it to Judy. Ethan's complexion drained just slightly. Judy looked up from the message, her stare cutting straight through Ethan's practiced charm. Her next words hovered like a blade about to fall. "Mr. Marlowe, would you like to explain this?" Ethan's smile held for half a second too long, the kind of smile that knew it was dying. The message in Judge Judy's hand glowed like cold fire under the courtroom lights, and when she lifted her eyes, the room felt the temperature drop. Ethan cleared his throat, straightened his suit jacket, and blinked with measured irritation. He looked everywhere except at the printed screenshot in Judy's grasp. His jaw flexed, a silent argument with himself, before he forced a breathy laugh. "That message is taken out of context," he said, smoothing his tone into what he thought was diplomacy. "People text things in frustration. It does not mean anything serious." But Judy did not break eye contact. She tapped the paper lightly against the desk, a soft, rhythmic sound that carried more accusation than any raised voice could. "Mr. Marlowe," she said, "this message reads, and I quote, 'Your little project only survives because I let it. Remember that.'" The tap stopped. Context does not change its meaning. A hush washed across the gallery. Even the air vents seemed to quiet themselves. Lila's breath hitched again, though this time it came with something new. Recognition, maybe even validation. The weight she carried alone was finally being held by someone else. Ethan stepped forward, hands spread in theatrical confusion. "Your Honor, you are misunderstanding. I was trying to motivate her. People in leadership need pressure sometimes." "Pressure?" Judy repeated, the word slicing cleaner than a gavel. Ethan nodded too quickly. "Yes, that is all it was. Encouragement, tough encouragement." The bailiff shifted, unable to hide his disbelief. Judy rested the paper flat on the desk. "Then you will have no problem clarifying why Ms. Torres reported that your encouragement included unannounced appearances at her private meetings." He froze. "I attended public events," he tried, voice cracking at the edges. "I was invited." Lila shook her head softly. "You were not. Not once." Ethan shot her a sharp look, the first real fracture in his facade. "She is exaggerating. Again." Judy leaned in ever so slightly. "Then explain why sponsors withdrew immediately after you spoke with them." His eyes flickered, a tiny, almost imperceptible tell, but Judy caught it like a hawk spotting movement in tall grass. He looked down for the first time since the hearing began. I cannot control what sponsors decide," he muttered. "No," Judy replied, "but intimidation has a way of influencing decisions." The room stilled. For a moment, Ethan's chest rose too quickly, like he was trying to inhale confidence and coming up short. He glanced at the audience, searching for someone, anyone, who might still believe him, but the rows of faces held only quiet discomfort. Then, without warning, Judy reached for a thin folder on her desk, not the one containing Lila's evidence, but a separate, slimmer file she had not yet opened. Ethan's eyes snapped to it, his posture stiffened. A flicker of genuine fear surfaced beneath his practiced composure. Judy slid the folder toward her, fingers resting on its unopened edge. Ethan's breathing changed, shallow, uneven. He knew that folder, and he definitely did not expect her to have it. The thin folder lay between them like a quiet threat, one Ethan had hoped stayed buried. His confidence did not shatter all at once. It splintered, tiny cracks racing through every carefully built layer. Judge Judy tapped it once, and the room held its breath. She did not open it immediately. That was the part that unnerved him most. A judge rifling through documents was ordinary. A judge waiting in silence, studying him instead of the paper, was something else entirely. Ethan shifted his weight, shoulders tightening, fingers tugging at the cuff of his sleeve, as if realigning fabric could realign fate. The smirk he usually wore had evaporated, replaced by a thin, uneasy grimace. "Mr. Marlowe," Judy said, voice low and even, "you seem unusually concerned about this folder." He forced a chuckle. It cracked on the way out. "I'm just wondering what it contains. That is all." Judy's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "You already know." The words hit him harder than a raised voice ever could. The gallery leaned forward as if pulled by gravity. Lila stood still, watching him with a mixture of fear and something new, curiosity, maybe even strength. Her palms no longer pressed the folder to her chest. She held it lower now, as if the weight had eased. Judy finally opened the thin folder. The sound, just paper shifting, felt louder than the gavel itself. Ethan swallowed. His throat bobbed visibly. "Your Honor, whatever that is, I'm sure there is a misunderstanding." "I'm sure," she said, eyes scanning the first page. "Just not in the way you think." He blinked rapidly. His breathing no longer matched the calm cadence he forced earlier. It was uneven, every breath a negotiation. "This," Judy began, lifting a single sheet between two fingers, "is a statement from one of the sponsors you claim to have never influenced." Her tone sharpened. "It details a phone call you made, strongly suggesting they withdraw their support if they valued their future political cooperation." A few gasps fluttered through the gallery. Ethan's face whitened. "That is taken out of—" "Do not say context," Judy warned, her voice slicing through his excuse like clean glass. "We have already walked that road." He closed his mouth, jaw trembling. Lila inhaled shakily, her eyes darting between the page and Ethan's fallen gaze. For the first time, she saw not a powerful man, but a man scrambling. Judy set the sponsor statement down and opened another page. Ethan's breath hitched. This time, he did not hide it. "You used your father's position," she said quietly, "as leverage. That is not just unethical. That's abusive." He stepped back a half-inch, as if her words had weight. "Your Honor," he whispered, "I was trying to help the project stay legitimate. Some of the people she was working with are—" "Stop!" One word, soft, final, undeniable. The courtroom froze around it. Judy's eyes lifted from the papers to his face and did not blink. "What you did," she continued, "was not help, it was control." Ethan's lips parted. No words came out. Judy closed the folder slowly, deliberately, as if sealing something irreversible. Ethan stared at it like a confession he never meant to write, and when she asked her next question, his entire facade wavered in the fluorescent light. The pressure did not rise suddenly. It crept in, tightening around Ethan like an invisible cord. His excuses were running out, and the silence between each lie grew sharper. Even the lights overhead seemed harsher now, exposing every flinch he tried to hide. Judge Judy did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her calm held more gravity than any courtroom thunder. She folded her hands, letting the folded folder remain between them like a mirror Ethan refused to look into. "Mr. Marlowe," she said, "I want you to answer clearly. Did you threaten any sponsor connected to Ms. Torres's project?" Ethan inhaled sharply, chest rising too fast. "No, I did not threaten anyone. I expressed concern, that is all." Judy tilted her head. "One sponsor states otherwise." He pressed his palms against the podium, knuckles whitening. "Sponsors exaggerate. People misinterpret intentions." Lila stepped forward, her voice steadier than it had been all morning. "Every sponsor withdrew within 48 hours of speaking to him, Your Honor. All of them. They told me they did not want to cross the wrong family." Ethan snapped his head toward her. "That is hearsay." "Lower your voice," Judy warned, her tone flat but edged. He froze. The bailiff's stance stiffened just slightly, a reminder that arrogance could only stretch so far before something snapped. Lila continued, pulling a small envelope from her folder. Inside was a printout, edges slightly crumpled. "This is an email from the venue coordinator. She apologized for canceling on us, said she received a phone call she could not ignore. She did not name him, but she did not have to." Judy accepted the printout, reading carefully. Her brow tightened. "Mr. Marlowe, this is yet another coincidence in your favor. How many coincidences do you expect this courtroom to believe?" He hesitated, just long enough to betray himself. "I cannot control other people's fears. They assume things about my father. That is not my fault." "That argument," Judy replied, "only works if you did nothing to encourage those assumptions." The room stilled. Ethan swallowed again, his breath sputtering beneath the thin veneer of confidence he tried to patch together. He tugged at his cuffs, then clasped his hands behind his back, then crossed his arms, a restless carousel of defensive postures. "Ms. Torres," Judy said softly, Is there more you wish to present? Lila nodded, lifting a final sheet, a simple one, a single line of text, but heavy enough to darken the air around it. This is the message he sent me the night before our first fundraiser collapsed. I have not shown it yet. Ethan's eyes widened. You do not have to. She handed it to the clerk. When Judy read it, she paused. Her expression, normally controlled, shifted, a brief, unmistakable flicker of disappointment. The message was short. You should learn when to stop. Ethan's jaw clenched. It was advice. No, Judy said, voice cold as glass. It was intimidation. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words faltered. The room felt too tight. The walls seemed to lean closer, and the power he thought he owned was slipping through his fingers like dust. Judy set the message down with deliberate finality. Ethan's breath hitched, the fight in his voice weakening, and just as he braced to speak again, Judy leaned back, studying him with the calm of someone who already knew what came next. If you were sitting in that courtroom, what would you do? Stay silent or speak up when intimidation hides behind influence? Ethan's composure did not break gently. It snapped, sharp and sudden, like glass under pressure. The moment Judy leaned back in her chair, giving him space to speak, he mistook it for weakness. And that mistake became the spark that lit the fuse. He stepped forward too quickly, the movement abrupt enough to draw a glance from the bailiff. His breath was shallow, his jaw clamped tight, his pupils dilated beneath the overhead lights. The political polish he had entered the courtroom with had been stripped raw, leaving behind the true tenor of his temper. Your Honor, he began, his voice strained and rising before he could stop it. This entire thing is a setup. Do you understand that? I am being targeted because of who my father is. Judy did not blink. You are being questioned because of what you did. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Questioned? No, this is an ambush. You are treating me like some criminal. Lower your tone, the bailiff warned, stepping half a foot closer. Ethan swung a glare in his direction. The gallery stiffened at the shift, a flash of entitlement bordering on danger. He caught himself, exhaled shakily, and turned back to Judy with a tight, twitching smile. Forgive me, he said, though the word carried no sincerity. But this is ridiculous. Sponsors, emails, these things can be faked, twisted. People lie, Your Honor. And yet, Judy replied calmly, your voice is the only one cracking under questions. A ripple moved through the gallery. Ethan's nostrils flared. That is because everyone is pushing me, he snapped. Her, he jabbed a finger toward Lila. The sponsors, the media. Do not point at her, Judy said, voice suddenly colder than before. His finger froze midair. The command settled over the room like a dropped curtain. Slowly, he lowered his hand, but his anger searched for a new outlet. His breathing quickened. His hands trembled, though he hid them in his pockets to keep them from showing the shake. Ms. Torres is manipulating this entire narrative to make herself look like a victim, he said, words spilling faster now, losing shape. She is using my name for attention. Do you know how many people try that? Do you have any idea what it is like to be held accountable? Judy offered. His mouth snapped shut. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Lila watched him carefully, her expression no longer fearful, only tired. There was something achingly human in her eyes, a kind of grief for the person he could have been if fear and power had not twisted him. Ethan caught her look and mistook it for pity. Do not look at me like that, he hissed, his mask finally tearing. You think you are innocent? You think you did nothing to provoke? The clerk gasped softly. Even the cameras seemed to tilt inward, capturing the moment he exposed what he had been hiding behind polish and politics. Judy leaned forward, eyes narrowing with quiet fury. Mr. Marlowe, she said, finish that sentence. I want to hear exactly what you believe she provoked. Ethan froze. His anger had led him right into the open. His lips parted, but the words no longer obeyed him. The courtroom felt suspended, hanging on the edge of what he might say next, and somewhere in that fragile silence, he realized he had finally crossed into territory he could not walk back from. Ethan's unfinished sentence lingered in the air like a bruise waiting to darken. Judge Judy let the silence stretch until even the cameras seemed afraid to blink. Then, without warning, she reached for a second document, one he never thought she would find. The paper rustled softly as Judy lifted it, but the sound cut through the room with the sharpness of a warning bell. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. His eyes locked on the document like prey, sensing the shadow of a hawk overhead. "Mr. Marlowe," Judy began, her voice measured, "before you embarrass yourself further, I want to introduce something new into the record." Lila's breath caught, the bailiff's posture sharpened, even the gallery collectively straightened as if gravity had shifted. Judy unfolded the paper. Ethan swallowed so hard the movement echoed in the silence. "This is a statement," Judy said, "from the coordinator of the youth center, the one that revoked Ms. Torres's venue reservation." His jaw tightened, visibly, involuntarily. Judy continued, "It includes the transcript of a voicemail you left." She paused, a surgical pause. "One you insisted did not exist." The gallery murmured, shock rippling like a wave across wooden benches. Ethan took a staggered step forward. "Your Honor, that cannot be accurate. I never left." "Do not lie to me again," Judy interrupted, her voice still calm but now edged with something unmistakably final. "It was preserved automatically by their security system. You were unaware of that, I assume." His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, no words surviving the panic choking them. Lila pressed a hand over her heart, the realization hitting her like a slow, quiet relief. There had been proof all along. Judy lowered her eyes to the transcript and read aloud, each word like a nail driven into the wall of Ethan's constructed version of events. "If you continue pushing this little charity fantasy, I promise you, you will not like the friends you make, or the enemies." She lifted her gaze. The room was dead silent. Ethan's breath hitched audibly, his face drained of color, then flushed, then flickered somewhere between fear and fury. He shook his head as though the motion alone could rewrite the truth. I did not mean it like, finish one sentence without a contradiction," Judy said, her voice low. "And maybe I will entertain the idea you meant something else." He could not. Every attempt collapsed under its own weight, half-starts, false bravado, splintered confidence. His hands trembled openly now, no longer hidden in pockets or behind forced posture. The bailiff moved a step closer. Lila's eyes filled, not with triumph, but with the slow, aching relief of someone whose truth had finally survived the storm. Judy set the transcript down, the paper landing with a soft sound that somehow felt louder than a gavel strike. "You have misled this courtroom," she said, repeatedly. "And now, the evidence speaks instead." Ethan flinched, not from volume, from truth. Judy lifted her gaze, her eyes locked on him with an intensity colder than judgment. "Mr. Marlowe," she said softly, "there is one more thing you need to hear." And as the room braced, he realized the worst wasn't the evidence she had, but the evidence she hadn't revealed yet. The courtroom did not breathe for several seconds after Judy read the transcript. Ethan stood frozen, the truth spreading around him faster than he could deny it. And for the first time, he looked like someone realizing there might be no version of this story he could still control. He blinked rapidly, like the lights had suddenly grown too bright. His lips parted, then pressed together again, forming shapes of excuses that never made it beyond his throat. He looked younger now, not in innocence, but in a kind of unraveling that stripped away every mask he had worn since entering the room. Judy rested the transcript neatly atop the folder, palms flat, posture steady. Her silence was surgical, a space intentionally carved for him to face the weight of his own words. "Your Honor," he finally whispered, the bravado drained from each syllable. "That voicemail, that was a moment of frustration. I did not intend any harm." "It does not matter what you intended," Judy replied, her tone precise. "Actions speak without your permission." Lila watched him closely, not with triumph, not with vengeance. Her expression held something far more complicated, a quiet sadness for what his choices had cost them both. She clasped her hands in front of her, steady now, the tremor from earlier replaced with a grounded resolve. "I tried to reason with him," she said softly. "I told him the project was for the kids, but he kept calling, showing up. Every time I gained ground, something, or someone, shut a door." Ethan shook his head, panic rising. "I did not stalk you. That accusation is insane." "Then explain," Judy said, leaning forward slightly, "how you knew about meetings she never publicly announced." He froze. A bead of sweat traced down his temple, glistening under the fluorescent lights. His breath stuttered again, that same uneven rhythm Lila had described, the one that always preceded his threats. His eyes darted around the room, searching for lifelines that no longer existed. I heard things, he muttered. People talk. Names, Judy said sharply. Which people? He hesitated too long. The hesitation was its own answer. The gallery whispered in low, unsettled tones. Even the bailiff's posture stiffened, sensing a shift in the nature of the case, something darker than arrogance alone. Lila took a step forward, voice barely above a murmur. Did you follow me, Ethan? His breath caught. It was not a yes, but it was nowhere near a no. Judy reached for the transcript again, tapping it once. This is your opportunity to tell the truth, she said. Half-truths will not save you, not today. Ethan closed his eyes for one long second, a second that revealed more than any outburst he had made so far. His shoulders slumped, his defenses thinning under the pressure of exposure. But when he opened them again, the panic in his gaze turned into something else. Defiance. The kind born not from strength, but from desperation. I do not owe her explanations, he snapped, voice cracking, or this court. You have no idea what she... He stopped himself, too late. The room tensed around the unfinished accusation. Judy's stare sharpened, unblinking. Mr. Marlowe, she said quietly, finish your thought. And in that suspended moment, everyone knew the next words out of his mouth could shatter far more than his case. Do you believe remorse should ever erase guilt? Or does justice demand accountability even when someone claims they never meant harm? Ethan tried to swallow the last sentence he almost let slip, but the room had already tasted its bitterness. The tension did not rise like a wave. It rose like a wall behind him, closing in inch by inch. And with nowhere left to run, he did the thing desperate people do. He changed masks. His stance shifted first, shoulders falling, chin dipping, voice softening as if he had rehearsed humility, but never needed to use it until now. The arrogance that once carried him across the courtroom had thinned into something gentler, almost fragile. Your Honor, he began, quieter than before, I am not the villain she is painting me to be. I've been under a lot of pressure. The work, the attention, the expectations. Sometimes I do not handle things perfectly. Judy did not move. Her stillness was the kind that stripped away excuses. Pressure, she repeated, does not justify intimidation. He forced a small, shaky smile, the kind someone wears when trying to look human after being caught. I understand that, and I am sorry if I came across too strongly. That was never my intention. Lila's eyes hardened with disbelief. You did not come across strongly. You came across threatening. Ethan flinched but kept his voice soft. I was trying to help. I saw her making choices that could put her project at risk, and I tried to step in. Maybe too forcefully. Maybe I misunderstood my role. Judy raised a hand, stopping him mid-performance. Mr. Marlowe, you did not misunderstand your role. You invented one. He blinked, the softness in his expression flickering. Judy leaned forward slightly. You were not a founder, a partner, or a supervisor. You were an observer who decided observation was not enough. The gallery murmured. Ethan tightened his jaw before softening it again. A cycle. A scramble to find the version of himself that would seem most believable. I admit I became invested, he said, voice trembling. I cared about the project. I cared about... He stopped, too abruptly. Judy noticed. So did Lila. What exactly did you care about? Judy asked, tone deceptively calm. Ethan looked down at his hands, twisting them, untwisting them. The polished mask faltered completely now, replaced by the raw discomfort of someone wrestling with a truth he did not want to name. Before he could answer, Lila stepped closer, her voice steady. Why were you at meetings I never shared publicly? Why did you show up at the cafe where I worked on grant proposals? Why did you know things I never told anyone? A tremor rippled through Ethan's expression, fear, then anger, then something darker. He breathed through his nose, sharp and uneven. I heard things, he repeated weakly. From who? Judy pressed. He hesitated. Too long. The silence exposed him. Judy nodded toward the clerk. Please read the timestamp on the voicemail. The clerk read it aloud. Ethan's eyes widened. He recognized the date immediately. Lila did too. Her breath caught because that night was one she had never spoken of. A night tied to a private location, a private moment, a private conversation. Ethan's chest rose too quickly. Judy leaned closer, voice a blade wrapped in velvet. You knew where she was that night, without being told. His face drained. A single bead of sweat slid down his cheek, betraying what his mouth could not admit. Judy's stare narrowed, striking straight through the mask he thought he still wore. Mr. Marlowe, she said softly, how did you know where she was? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. His silence wasn't denial, it was recognition. The kind that freezes a man because he finally hears the truth inside himself. And in that frozen second, the courtroom realized he'd crossed a line he never intended to reveal. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, humming against the tension clogging the air. Ethan's eyes darted. To the floor, the table, the door, anywhere except Lila's face. His lips moved without sound, forming the shape of a confession his pride refused to let him speak. Judy didn't look away. She watched him the way a surgeon waits for a heartbeat to steady before cutting deeper. Mr. Marlowe, she said, voice low but piercing, I'm going to ask again. How did you know where Ms. Torres was on the night of that voicemail? His throat bobbed violently. I told you. People talk. Lila stepped forward. Who? Who knew where I was that night? Ethan's gaze flickered. That tiny movement, that one involuntary betrayal, was all Judy needed. No one knew, Lila whispered, her voice trembling only at the edges. I had dinner alone. I wrote drafts alone. I went home alone. I didn't check in with anyone. And the location wasn't on social media. The gallery murmured, the sound swelling like the first rumble of a coming storm. Ethan's breathing sharpened. He gripped the podium, knuckles turning bone white. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff he'd built himself, brick by brick, now realizing the drop was far steeper than he ever imagined. I wasn't following her, he muttered, the denial thin, fragile, and unconvincing. Judy leaned forward, not aggressively, but with precision. A camera zoomed in, catching the cold focus in her eyes. What did you do that night? She asked softly. He shook his head. Nothing. I heard. You heard nothing, Judy cut in, because there was nothing to hear. Lila's hand fluttered to her chest, an instinctive gesture of shock. Her breaths came shallow now, not from fear of Ethan, but from the dawning realization of what his silence meant. Ethan felt the walls close in again, the lights grew hotter, his suit suddenly felt too tight, his skin too thin. I wasn't stalking her, he whispered, and the whisper told the truth he didn't want it to. You were watching her, Judy said, voice now edged with steel, from somewhere close enough to know her movements, close enough to know her schedule, close enough, she looked directly into his eyes, to know where she was even when she told no one. He exhaled sharply, a sound half breath, half panic. No, he rasped. I was making sure she was safe. Lila recoiled. Safe? I didn't even know you were there. The courtroom froze. Ethan hadn't just admitted proximity. He'd admitted presence, uninvited presence, unannounced presence, unwanted presence. Judy's expression shifted, something colder, sharper, weighed down by moral gravity. Safety, she said, tasting the word like poison someone dared her to swallow, does not require secrecy. His eyes glistened, not with remorse, but with the terror of someone realizing he'd said too much. Judy lifted a hand, stopping him from speaking again. Mr. Marlowe, she said, her voice turning heavy with revelation, there is something you have not told this court. And in the silence that followed, the truth rose behind her words like a shadow ready to swallow everything he'd built. Ethan didn't collapse loudly. He collapsed inward, like a structure losing the last beam holding it upright. The courtroom sensed it before he did, the shift from defiance to something hollow, exposed. And when Judy finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of what his silence had already confessed. Judy lowered her hand, and with it, the entire room seemed to exhale. The tension didn't break, it softened into something heavier. Ethan stood perfectly still, but nothing about him felt anchored anymore. His shoulders sagged, his breathing came shallow, and the confident posture he'd clung to all morning melted into something unmistakably defeated. The fall had not been dramatic. It had been inevitable. "Mr. Marlowe," Judy said, her voice slow, steady, deliberate, "you have crossed from arrogance into danger. That line was not blurred. You walked over it willingly." Ethan closed his eyes, not to think, but to hide. His hands trembled against the podium, fingers curling inward, as though gripping the last scraps of dignity he still believed he owned. When he opened his eyes again, they were glassy, unfocused, hollow. "I wasn't trying to hurt her," he whispered. I didn't want her to fail. I thought I was protecting her from herself." Lila inhaled sharply, her expression twisting with shock and disbelief. "I didn't ask for your protection. I just wanted space to work. You turned that into a reason to follow me." He winced at the word follow, the word he never wanted spoken aloud. Judy examined him in silence, and the silence was merciless. It drew the truth out of him more effectively than any interrogation. "I didn't realize it looked like that," he murmured, voice fading. "I thought I was being present." "Presence without permission," Judy replied, "is intrusion." The line hit him harder than any accusation so far. His eyes flicked to Lila, not with anger, but with something like regret. A small, broken sound escaped him, barely audible but full of the weight he'd been refusing to carry. Lila stepped forward, voice softer now but no less firm. "Ethan, you scared me. You made me question myself, my decisions, my safety. That isn't care, that isn't concern, that's control." He swallowed, throat tight. "I didn't want it to be that." "But it was," Judy said. Her tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. "And your refusal to acknowledge that made it worse." A dull thud echoed as Ethan's hands finally fell from the podium to his sides. The posture was no longer defensive, it was surrendered. Even the gallery, once buzzing with curiosity, fell into a hush. There was no drama now, only consequence. The cameras zoomed in slowly, capturing his first moment of true vulnerability, the realization that the image he clung to was dust now, slipping through fingers that had once gripped power too tightly. Judy's gaze softened, but her words remained razor-sharp with truth. "This courtroom is not here to punish who you think you are," she said. "It is here to reveal who you've been." Ethan blinked back the burning in his eyes, not tears, not yet, but the sting that comes just before them. Judy leaned back, steepling her fingers, the weight of her next question settling like a storm cloud. "Mr. Marlowe," she said quietly, "now that the truth is on the table, what do you want to say to Ms. Torres?" And the room held its breath, waiting to hear whether he would crumble further or finally face himself. Ethan didn't lift his head right away. It hung low, as if the floorboards held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. And when he finally looked up, the arrogance was gone, replaced by something uneven, unsteady, painfully human. His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. He stood there breathing shallowly, each inhale scraping against the burden he'd been avoiding. The cameras were trained on him, ready to capture either sincerity or performance, whichever he chose to offer. "Ms. Torres," he began. The voice didn't belong to the man who once swaggered into the courtroom. It belonged to someone stripped of his armor. "I didn't realize how much damage I was causing." Lila's eyes flickered, not with forgiveness, but with a cautious willingness to listen. Judy watched both of them, expression unreadable, gaze sharp enough to cut through falsehood in a word. "I thought I was helping," he continued, voice wobbling. I thought I was being supportive. I see now that I wasn't. I was suffocating the project. And I was suffocating you." He swallowed hard, throat tight. "I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, thin and trembling, like a fragile thread. But Judy didn't react. She didn't soften. She didn't harden. She simply waited. "Why now?" Lila asked quietly. "Why only now, when everything is sitting in front of you, when you can't deny it anymore?" He flinched at her precision. "Because I didn't see it. I didn't see myself. I thought being involved meant caring. I thought watching out for you was good. I didn't understand how it felt to you. The words were clumsy and raw, a stumbling confession from a man who was only now realizing the shape of his own actions. Lila stepped closer. "You didn't listen," she said softly. "Every time I told you to give me space, you pushed harder." His eyes glistened again, but not with manipulation this time. The fear of exposure had shifted into a different kind of ache, the ache of confronting a truth that reshaped him from the inside out. "I know," he whispered. "I didn't know how to let go. I didn't know how to not be involved. I thought I was protecting something important." He hesitated. "And I didn't want to be irrelevant." Judy's eyes sharpened. There it was, the real confession. "Relevance," she repeated. "That is what this was about." Ethan nodded weakly. "I guess, yes, I wanted to matter. I wanted to feel like I was contributing. But I went about it in the worst possible way." The gallery murmured, sensing the emotional shift, not a redemption arc but a recognition of failure. Lila exhaled slowly, eyes softening but not forgiving. "You could have just asked how to help." He winced. "I should have." Judy leaned forward, finally breaking her silence. "Mr. Marlowe, sincerity is not measured by volume. It is measured by accountability." He nodded. "I accept that." "Do you?" she asked, voice quiet but unyielding. This time he answered without hesitation. "Yes." The room stilled, holding the fragile weight of his admission. Judy narrowed her gaze, studying him not as a defendant, but as a man finally stripped bare. "Then," she said, "you won't object to hearing exactly how your actions will be addressed." Ethan inhaled sharply, knowing redemption, if it existed at all, was about to be tested. Judy reached for the final document with a deliberateness that silenced even the restless hum of the overhead lights. Ethan straightened instinctively, as if bracing for impact he knew he deserved, and in the thick quiet that followed, every person in the courtroom felt the gravity of what was coming. The paper she held wasn't dramatic. No bold lettering, no incriminating photos, no explosive transcript. Just a plain page with a single paragraph, but the kind of paragraph that closed doors and opened truth. Her fingers smoothed its surface once, a gesture almost tender in contrast to the devastation it carried. "This," she said, lifting her eyes to Ethan, "is a formal summary from the Youth Center's board. It details the cumulative consequences of your interference, subtle and overt." The words didn't rise. They deepened. Ethan swallowed, the sound audible even from across the room. Judy continued carefully, each sentence measured like a careful stitch in a wound that needed to be closed properly. "It states that your phone calls created fear of political backlash, that your presence at Ms. Torres's private events raised concerns about impropriety, that your comments, even the ones you claim were harmless, caused reputational damage to both her and the project." Leila's eyes lowered, the weight of the summary hitting her more personally than she expected. This wasn't just proof, it was validation of the months she spent second-guessing her own experiences. Ethan inhaled shakily. His voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. I didn't realize the impact." "That," Judy replied, "is precisely the problem." He shut his eyes for a moment, as if steadying himself against the truth he'd avoided for too long. When he opened them, they carried a heaviness that had nothing to do with defeat and everything to do with recognition. Judy set the summary down. The page made a soft, final sound, the kind that landed like a verdict long before one was spoken. "In this room," she said, folding her hands, "we do not measure harm by intent. We measure it by effect." The gallery remained silent, breath held tight. The cameras zoomed in, capturing Ethan's face as the statement settled into him, a quiet devastation spreading slowly, thoroughly. Lila stood taller now, not triumphant, but finally unburdened. Her eyes shimmered not with tears, but with the relief of someone being seen clearly for the first time. Judy turned her attention to her, softer now, but still weighted with purpose. "Ms. Torres," she said, "you have shown remarkable resilience. What you endured would have shaken many, yet you continued your work, your advocacy, and your pursuit of truth." Lila nodded, a trembling smile forming in the corner of her mouth. Then Judy looked back at Ethan. "Mr. Marlowe," she said, Your actions require formal acknowledgement and consequence. His breath hitched. There was no fight left in him, only the quiet dread of a man about to hear something he cannot charm or outrun. Judy lifted her gavel slightly, not yet striking, just letting the weight of the moment settle. "The court," she said, her voice steady as stone, "will now deliver its judgment." And the room tilted into silence, every soul suspended on the edge of her final word. Before we hear her verdict, ask yourself, what does true accountability look like when power and intention collide? Judge Judy held the gavel suspended, the way a conductor holds a baton at the edge of a final note. Ethan stared at it like a man waiting for a sentence carved in stone. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried the clarity of truth, cutting through the last fog of denial. "The court has heard enough," Judy began, lowering the gavel but keeping her grip firm. "This is not a case of misunderstanding, not a miscommunication, not a misstep blown out of proportion." Her gaze locked onto Ethan, steady, unwavering. "This is a pattern." The word echoed in the courtroom, not loudly, but deeply, reverberating through the rows of silent spectators. "A pattern of intimidation," she continued, "of manipulation, of using influence not to uplift someone's work, but to control its direction. And when control slipped from your hands, you tightened your grip rather than letting go." Ethan swallowed, staring at the floor now. His chest rose and fell with slow, uneven breaths. The illusion he carried, of power, entitlement, immunity, had not merely cracked, it had crumbled. Judy shifted her gaze toward Lila, and her voice softened just enough to carry warmth beneath the steel. "Ms. Torres, your courage in bringing this forward is commendable. You have demonstrated resilience where many would have retreated. This court acknowledges the emotional, professional, and personal strain you endured." Lila blinked, fighting the swell of emotion that tightened her breath, but she stood tall. Judy returned her attention to Ethan. "As for you, Mr. Marlowe, the evidence shows that your actions compromised this project, intimidated its founder, and created an environment of fear. This is unacceptable, both legally and ethically." Ethan's shoulders sank further. For once, there was no protest waiting behind his tongue. "Therefore," Judy said, lifting the final document, "this court rules in favor of Ms. Torres." Lila closed her eyes, a quiet exhale escaping her, not triumphant, not relieved, but deeply, profoundly released. Judy continued, "You are to provide full restitution for the financial losses incurred due to your interference. Additionally, you will issue a formal written apology acknowledging your conduct. And because your behavior involved misuse of influence and implied threats, this case will be formally referred to the appropriate authorities for review." A sharp breath rippled through the gallery. Even the cameras seemed to steady on him, capturing the moment Ethan's last layer of denial dissolved. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "I understand." Judy nodded once, not unkindly. "This is not about your father," she said. "This is about you, and the choices you made when you thought no one was watching." Ethan's eyes lifted for the first time since the verdict began. The expression wasn't defiant or angry. It was hollow, sobering, human in a way he had never allowed himself to be. Lila watched him, and in her eyes there was no gloating, only quiet clarity. Judy raised the gavel. "Let this serve as a reminder," she said, her voice now carrying both authority and something like weary wisdom, "that arrogance collapses the moment truth walks into the room." The gavel struck. A single sharp crack. The sound lingered, outlasting the moment itself. Lila stood anchored, Ethan sat unraveling, and Judy remained still, the calm center in a storm she refused to let win. And in the silence that followed, justice didn't feel loud. It felt right,